Hi there, Andrew Price from Dryad Bushcraft CIC here, and I've been asked to do a short video on how to sharpen a knife, or I should say how to keep a knife sharp. So I'm sure most of you have seen this type of knife. This is the ones that we use for most of our bushcraft courses. It's the Frost's Mora clipper knife, a very basic, inexpensive option. This particular one is stainless steel, and it's an ideal tool for learning the basic techniques of safe knife handling for bushcraft. So we've used them for years. I started Dryad Bushcraft in 2004, and this is the knife that we've used pretty much from the start. We started off with green ones, and we lost most of them, so we switched to these high-vis orange ones, which are a good idea. But the feature that makes these knives so perfect for bushcraft is, well, several. Firstly, they're very comfortable in the hand. They have a well-designed rubber grip, which most people seem to get on quite well with. So it's very good. Even if your hands are a bit wet, it will still allow you to grip the knife. And they have a stainless steel blade, which is less likely to rust, which is important as well. But the main feature is what we call the Scandi Grind, which is a flat grind. And that means that the cutting edge looks in profile a bit like that. So it's basically, you have the flat part of the blade, then the angle changes, and that goes all the way to the cutting edge like that. So if you look at the blade that way, it should be completely flat on both sides all the way to the cutting edge. There shouldn't be any secondary bevel, and that's why we use these knives. They work extremely well for carving wood, and you can also use them for general purpose use, preparing vegetables, things like that. So a really useful tool. But like all tools, it needs to be maintained, and we have a saying that a blunt knife is a dangerous knife, or a sharp knife is a safe knife, depending on how you want to look at it. So if your knife is blunt, the reason it's more dangerous is because you have to put a lot of force into using it. So if the knife is razor sharp, as in sharp enough to cut the hairs on your arm, then it will work wood with very little effort, and that means it's far safer to use. So we keep the knife sharp rather than letting it get very, very blunt and then having to resharpen it. We tend to maintain the edge. Now, there are a couple of tools I use to do that. You can buy very expensive Japanese waterstones, but to be honest, for keeping one of these in usable condition, you'd be better off paying about £10 to £12 and getting something like this. This is a diamond hone, or diamond sharpening stone, which is basically a four-sided block with steel faces impregnated with very fine industrial diamonds. Now, the higher the number, the finer the profile. So if I take that to you there, you'll see there are a series of numbers on there, ranging from 200 up to 600. So the 200 is very coarse. I would generally only use that if I'd accidentally taken a chunk out of the blade and I had to kind of completely reprofile the edge. What I'd normally use is the finer one, which is the 600 grit. It's the red one there. And using that 600 grit will allow me to keep the knife sharp rather than constantly having to work it all the time. Now, in order to sharpen it, what we need to do is to maintain that flat grind, that flat face on each side. So what I normally do, and this works best in good light when you can see the shadows, but if you put the blade flat down onto the block like this, so that the flat part of the blade is flush with the surface of the block, and then just allowing light two-finger pressure, just tilt until you feel some resistance, then you know that the angle there is flat against the stone. I hope that makes sense to everybody. I will do it a few times so that everybody can see. So if you've got good light, you can often see a little shadow under there, which disappears when it's flat. So that's a good position to be in. Now I'm going to gently push forwards and then just lift off as I get to the edge. And I'm doing the same thing the other way. So putting very little downward pressure, just trying to maintain that edge as well as I can. Another good tip is to cover the whole of the face, the sharp edge here, with a black magic marker. And then when you sharpen it, it'll remove the ink in the areas that you're sharpening, so you know which bits you've missed and which bits you've removed. What you're ultimately trying to do when you sharpen a knife is to remove metal. So you're trying to remove a thin layer of steel and reveal that sharp edge. Now, by doing it regularly, using a fine grit sharpening stone like this, you'll never have to spend hours at it. I normally spend, you know, a couple of minutes after I've used the knife for a while. Maybe if I'm doing a lot of work with it, I'll stop every few minutes and just touch up the edge on the sharpening stone, and that keeps it safe and means that I can work the edge very regularly. So I keep the stone close by. Now if you are on the move, traveling around, you might want to use something like this one, which is a DMT sort of folding sharpening stone. So it's like a mini version of this one, and to use that slightly different technique, because you don't have the option of putting it down, I tend to hold it flat and work one way and then the other way. Be very careful when you are using it towards yourself, because if you're not concentrating you could cut yourself. So you can just go that way and then that way. If you really don't trust yourself, you can just alternate hands and maintain the edge like that. So lots of ways of using it. I know several people use it in different ways, but the important thing is that we keep those surfaces completely flat and not round them off. So what you don't want to be doing, so this is how we want it to look. You don't want to be taking off the tip and eventually rounding it off like that. Eventually you end up with a knife that can't be sharpened. So I hope that makes sense. It's one of those things that's worth learning, because if you've bought a good knife, you want to keep it sharp for safety and for utility. So hope you enjoy using it.